We may define a karst as comprising terrain with distinctive hydrology and landforms that arise from a combination of high rock solubility and well-developed secondary fracture porosity. Such areas are characterized by sinking streams, caves, enclosed depressions, fluted rock outcrops, and large springs. Considerable rock solubility alone is insufficient to produce karst. Rock structure and lithology are also important. Dense, massive, pure and coarsely fractured rocks develop the best karst. Karsts are buried by later consolidated rocks and are inert, that is, they are hydrologically decoupled from the contemporary system. We refer to these as paleokarsts. They have often experienced tectonic subsidence and frequently lie unconformably beneath clastic cover rocks. Occasionally they are exhumed and reintegrated into the active system, thus resuming a development that was interrupted for perhaps tens of millions of years. Contrasting with these irrelic karsts, which survived within the contemporary system, but are removed from the situation in which they were developed, just as river terraces, representing flood plains of the past, are now remote from the river that formed them. Relict karsts have often been subject to a major change in basal level. A high-level corrosion surface with residual hills now located far above the modern water table is one example, drowned karst on the coast another. Drained upper-level passages in multi-level cave systems are found in perhaps the majority of karsts. The phenomenon is termed interstratal karstification and may be manifested by collapse or subsidence structures in the overlying rocks, or at the surface. Interstratal karstification occurs in carbonate rocks also, but is of less significance. Intrastratal karstification refers to the preferential dissolution of a particular bed or other unit within a sequence of soluble rocks, for example a gypsum bed in a dolomite formation. Reference is often made in European literature to exokarst, endokarst and cryptokarst. Exokarst refers to the suite of karst features developed at the surface. Endokarst concerns those developed underground. It is often divided into hyperkarst, in which the underground dissolution is by circulating meteoric waters, and hypokarst dissolution by juvenile or connate waters. Carbonate rocks thus acquire a range of voids of different origin that affect their capacity to store and transmit water. Karst aquifers are therefore commonly differentiated into three end-member types, according to the nature of the voids in which the water is stored and through which it is transmitted, namely granular, or matrix, fracture and conduit. A rock formation is regarded to be an aquifer when it can store, transmit and yield economically significant amounts of water. Karst aquifers like those of other rocks may be confined, unconfined, and perched. In contrast to the formation containing the aquifer, an impermeable rock that is incapable of absorbing or transmitting significant amounts of water is known as an aquifuge. Other rocks such as clay and mudstone may absorb large amounts of water, but when saturated, are unable to transmit it in significant amounts. These are termed aquifluids. A relatively less permeable bed in an otherwise highly permeable sequence is referred to as an aquitard. A calcareous sandstone in a karstified limestone sequence could provide However, not all of the water held in storage is released by gravitational flow, because that in the smallest pores is held by capillary attraction and molecular forces, and that below the level of the outflow spring is impounded. The volume of water that a unit volume of saturated rock releases following a unit decline in head is a measure of the available storage capacity of the aquifer. Transmissivity values will vary between the rock matrix, Fissure system and conduits, and specific yield can be expected to vary according to vertical position in the karst rock, because effective porosity also varies vertically. In most cases it will be highest in the most weathered zone of limestone near the surface, the epikarst, and usually diminishes exponentially with depth, but there are exceptions. Eventually, lithostatic pressure prevents the penetration of groundwater and precludes the development of secondary porosity. Sedimentologists define primary porosity as that created during deposition of the rock, that is created first, and secondary porosity as that resulting later from diagenesis. However, for the hydrogeologist, all types of bulk rock porosity are primary, sometimes referred to as matrix porosity, and on fracture, or fissure, porosity arising from rock folding and faulting, should be considered to be secondary. Point 1 Dissolution along penetrable fissures, by circulating groundwaters develops some pathways into pipes, conduits, or caves. This is referred to as tertiary porosity. These voids may continue to enlarge, while groundwater circulation persists. Schematic representation of the relations between groundwater flow field, hydraulic properties and geological factors in karst aquifers. Reproduced from Kirali, L. Karstification, and Groundwater Flow. In Kabrovsek, F. Edition. Evolution of karst, from pre-karst to cessation. Input control. A karst aquifer can be envisaged as an open system with a boundary defined by the catchment limits and with input, throughput, and output flows, mechanisms, and controls. In the simplest case, only karst rocks are found within the catchment and recharges derive solely from precipitation falling directly on them, termed autogenic recharge, figure 4.1a. However, commonly more complex geological circumstances occur, and runoff from neighboring or overlying non-karst rocks drains into the karst aquifer, termed allogenic recharge, figure 4.1b. Whereas autogenic recharge is often quite diffuse, down many fissures across the karst outcrop, allogenic recharge normally occurs as concentrated point inputs of sinking streams. Both the water chemistry and the recharge volume per unit area are different in these two styles of recharge, with considerable consequences for the scale and distribution of the development of secondary permeability. Emerged coral reefs provide natural examples of simple autogenic systems. Recharge is spatially uniform and distributed through innumerable pores and fissures across the outcrop. Where thick soils cover the bedrock, recharge conditions are modified. If the soil is less permeable than the rock beneath, then it provides a recharge regulator, limiting recharge to the infiltration capacity of the soil. Permeable rock formations overlying the karst also act as percolation governors in much the same way, their vertical saturated hydraulic conductivity being the principal control. Percolation input from a permeable soil is considered autogenic, whereas that from a permeable non-karstic capric is considered diffuse allogenic in origin. (1) Free draining springs, figure 5.17a and b. In these cases, the karst rock slopes towards and lies above the adjacent valley, into which karst water drains freely under gravity. The karst system is entirely or dominantly vadose, and is sometimes termed shallow karst, Bogley 1980. Complications may arise where the underlying impermeable rock is folded or has an irregular surface, because then subterranean ponding can occur with the consequent development of isolated phreatic zones too. Dammed springs, figure 5.17 CE. These are the most common type of karst springs. They result from the location of a major barrier in the path of underground drainage. Impoundment may be by another lithology, either faulted or in conformable contact, or be caused by valley aggradation, such as by glaciofluvial deposits. The denser salt water of the sea also forms a barrier to freshwater outflow. In each case, temporary overflow springs may form in response to high water tables. The type of cave upstream of the spring will determine whether its discharge spills from a flat passage developed close to the water table or wells up from a great depth within the phreatic zone. Thus, a dammed karst outflow site typically consists of a main low water spring with one or more associated high water relief springs. Smart, 1983a, has termed these overflow-underflow systems. In some situations, water escapes via a distributary system of several springs at about the same level, as described by Quidlin and Ewers, 1981, in the case of the sinkhole plain Mammoth Cave Green River System 3. Confined springs, figure 5.17 F and G. Artesian conditions prevail where karst rocks are confined by an overlying impervious formation. Fault plains sometimes provide exit routes for the water, elsewhere it may escape where the capric is breached by erosion. Since the emerging water is usually under hydrostatic pressure, an updome turbulent boil is particularly characteristic of spring pools in this class, although dam springs that are semi-confined by a particularly thick bed may also boil, especially during flood. Artesian springs are also sometimes termed Vauclusian after the type example, La Fontaine de Vaucluse, tables 5.5 and 5.9, in the south of France, Durazoya and Halleck 1973, Lavaux et al. 1992. Significant characteristics that might be incorporated into a classification of karst aquifers include style of recharge, flow media, flow type, conduit network topology, stores and storage capacity, and outflow response to recharge. Depending on the purpose of the classification, one or more of these may be emphasized or neglected. An important starting point for the more useful general classifications is the conceptualization of recharge and flow type. Burden and Papakis, 1963, first drew attention to this, distinguishing diffuse infiltration from concentrated infiltration, and diffuse circulation from concentrated, or localized, circulation. They also pointed out that the style of recharge may not precondition the type of flow in the saturated zone, thus concentrated circulation can occur even if recharge, infiltration, is diffuse and vice versa. White, 1969, termed these flow styles "diffuse" and "conduit." He also suggested how the occurrence of these contrasting forms of circulation might be deduced from readily observable geological variables, a conceptual classification of karst aquifers, and b. their presumed relationship to predominant flow regimes. Modified from Atkinson, T.C., Present and Future Directions in Karst Hydrogeology. Summary of cave patterns and their relationship to types of recharge and porosity. Reproduced from Palmer, A.N., Origin and Morphology of Limestone Caves. Upper, relationship of primary and secondary porosity and pore size to the hydraulic conductivity of karst rocks. The limestone is considered an equivalent porous medium consisting of straight tubes. Reproduced from Smith, D.I., Atkinson, T.C. and Drew, D.P., 1976. The hydrology of limestone terrains, in the science of speleology, eds. T.D. Ford and C.H.D. Cullingford, Academic Press, London, pages 179 to 212, lower, model of the changes in porosity and equivalent pore diameter in limestones from their initial state after deposition, through burial, uplift, and exposure to surface karstification, phylogenetic. Karst. A short circuit can occur when young limestones are karstified during diagenesis, eogenetic karst. The labels N/A on the dash lines refer to equivalent tube density and number of tubes per square centimeter. Reproduced from Vetcher, H.L. and Milroy, J.E., 2002, eogenetic karst from the perspective of an equivalent porous medium. Carbonates and evaporites, 17, 2, 182-96. This four-state model, to differentiate Friedrich and water table caves, as shown in Figure 7.13, is simplified and idealized. In reality, there is a greater mixing of the types. Ideal water table passages rarely extend for more than 1 to 2 kilometers, before being interrupted by shallow Friedrich loops, where local geological conditions change. A cave may be assigned to one category or another according to its predominant characteristics.